For lovers of the superhero genre, seeing a cinematic universe in which Marvel and DC heroes coexist would be nothing short of a festival, and it's possible that this will happen soon. Kevin Feige, the CEO of Marvel Studios, recently spoke out regarding a possible film crossover between Marvel and DC. Despite the fact that the two comic book titans have worked on several occasions in print, they've yet to do it in film. Comicbook.com posed the same question to Feige. Well, look, my typical response to things is never say never. I never imagined we'd make it this far. James Gunn hasn't mentioned anything because he's working on Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, which is set to start production before the end of the year. After completing and selling the Suicide Squad, he's halfway into the planning stages for Guardians 3. A crossover has been done before in comic books. For example, in 1996, DC vs. Marvel was released as a comic book series. It pitted each company's biggest superheroes against the rough equivalent of the other. Surprisingly, the outcome was decided by a fan vote. For example, Superman defeated Hulk because the majority of fans favored him. From September 2003 until March 2004, another limited series named JLA Avengers aired. The Grand Master, yep, the same character played by Jeff Goldblum in Thor Ragnarok, and Krona, a universe-destroying DC character who can be regarded to be Grandmaster's DC analog, pitted the Justice League of America and Avengers against one another. Amalgam Comics is a devoted imprint that, as the name suggests, bring characters from two different realms together. Many a comic book nerd's dream would be to see Justice League and Avengers in a single cinematic world. Of course, the main question is whether it would actually happen. James Gunn has also spoken with Marvel and DC about the possibility of their different cinematic universes colliding, admitting that it's unlikely but not impossible. As you may be aware, the MCU is set to return to the big screen after a 2-year vacation with the release of Black Widow in a few weeks. Meanwhile, the home release of Zack Snyder's Justice League infused new life into the DCEU. Both universes have packed schedules for the next 2 years, and with Marvel focused on re-establishing its own possible multiverse following the conclusion of Phase 3, the two could be on a more level playing field than ever before. James Gunn is one of the few persons who has tremendous things in both worlds to look forward to. The Suicide Squad will be released in theaters and on HBO Max on August 6, 2021, and Gunn can now focus on Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. Then, there's the possibility of a crossover between the two rogue organizations. That isn't just a fantasy. Gunn's supervisors at both Marvel and DC have discussed the possibility. I've casually discussed it with Marvel and DC's upper management. It's something I'd want to see happen. Gunn responded to questions from fans regarding possible crossovers. I don't believe it's plausible, but neither do I believe it's impossible. Gunn is responding to a question regarding the Guardians and the Suicide Squad meeting on screen. As far as we know, the two factions have never met in any capacity, yet plenty of heroes from both sides of the comic book divide have done so in the past. The Infinity Gauntlet has been worn by Superman and Spider-Man, Batman and Captain America, and even Darkseid. Despite the mythology that both Marvel and DC have to pick from, a crossover is quite unlikely. As Gunn points out, everything would be a huge logistical nightmare. It's difficult to picture a world where everyone who has to be involved can agree on enough to make it happen, given contacts, screen time, and different studios. It's difficult enough for Sony and Disney to share Marvel heroes without adding Warner Brothers and DC to the mix. Let's talk about the ways Marvel-DC crossover movies would work, and, well, also some ways they won't. Why won't it work? They poached each other's talent. There's no way of knowing whether any executives at Warner Brothers or Marvel Studios have ancient grievances, but if they do, it'll have to do with how the two businesses have poached people from each other. The Guardians trilogy director James Gunn was hired by Warner Brothers to work on the Suicide Squad nearly immediately after he was sacked from Marvel Disney. More recently, MovieWeb reported on Warner Brothers' attempt to entice Lupita Nyong'o and Tessa Thompson out of the DCEU by offering them a part of Catwoman in the next Batman film, which obviously failed. Why it could work. Money is the common goal. Money appeals to everyone, especially huge Hollywood studios. As such, Marvel Studios and Warner Brothers would be hard-pressed to reject down money, particularly from the prospect of a film that has the potential to gross more money than either the MCU or the DCEU franchises have ever done. Why it won't work. Money is also the problem. By the same token, while the desire for money is exactly what could get this business off the ground, it is also what could keep it on the ground indefinitely. Such a large-scale project is likely to produce a lot of money, but when two major studios back it, it becomes a question of who gets what and how much of it each side gets. It's not difficult to see the entire financial process becoming a shambles before pre-production even begins. Why it could work? It's already happened in the comics. Marvel and DC have already collaborated on comic crossovers, as indicated in the introduction. Entire comic storylines have been dedicated to seeing Spider-Man shaking hands with Superman or Galactus confronting Darkseid. But the 1996 DC vs. Marvel event was by far the most significant crossover. Superheroes and villains from both universes were pitted against each other by two gods representing DC and Marvel. Lobo versus Wolverine, Superman versus the Hulk, The Flash versus Quicksilver, and Wonder Woman versus Storm were just a few of the matchups that fans were treated to. If it happened in the comics, it's possible that it'll happen in the movies as well. Why it won't work? Mixed audiences, so can't please everyone. This is a common complaint when it comes to significant crossover versus battles. Consider the battles of Godzilla vs. Kong or Freddy vs. Jason. People will naturally be delighted to watch their favorite characters square off against each other and will turn out in droves to see it, but no one wants to see their favorite character lose. Why it could work? An amalgamation. When DC and Marvel teamed up in the 1990s for their biggest comic book crossover, it wasn't only to give readers a great fight to see. It intended to prove the groundwork for the development of a new universe and a new company that would be shared by both DC and Marvel. It was named Amalgam Comics, and it was developed to combine several heroes and villains into one: Super Soldier, Superman and Captain America, Dark Claw, Wolverine and Batman, Spider-Boy, Spider-Man and Superboy, Deadeye, Deadshot and Bullseye, and a slew of other characters were born as a result. Perhaps DC and Marvel could collaborate on a new film production in the same way.